Hey everybody, it's Harv. Let's finish the end of our chapter 18 lecture and talk about the end of World War One. So previously we were talking about the Russian Revolution, a huge event during World War One and the Russian Civil War, a little bit after the war. Let's talk about the end of the war and that Treaty of Versailles and the effects of the end of World War One, which were super important. So, Germany has one last big offensive, and that is in 1918 with their Meuse Argonne offensive. It's going to fail, and by the end of the war, it's just going to be too much for the Germans. The United States is going to get over and really bring a lot of new manpower and industrial power, and the writing is going to be on the wall for the Germans, and the war is over. And this is a little bit of review for us in class. So the Germans surrender at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, and the war is over. Wilhelm, he's going to abdicate to the Netherlands. We are going to see the Weimar Republic take over and sign an armistice. They're going to sign an armistice in a train car with the French and with the Allies. Ironically, Hitler will use that same train car to sign the armistice for the French when the French are defeated in World War II. And Germany is going to sue for peace. And once they do that, and we've talked about this in class, once the Weimar Republic does that, World War II is on. Okay, this is going to be a terrible time for Germany. We are going to see this be a peace process and peace treaty of revenge against the Germans. And World War II is going to get ready to go with the end of World War One. The Central Powers in Germany wanted to seek a peace based on Wilson's 14 points. It was a little bit more lenient towards the Germans, but we are going to see really the French and the British take charge of this peace process and really go after the Germans, and it's gonna be rough for them. Now, during this time, really important, we see at the end of World War One 4 major empires disintegrate: the Russian Empire, German Empire, Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, remember, was part of the Central Powers, had been the sick man of the East for a long time, and we are going to see it get carved up by European powers. We're going to see Great Britain create the state of Iraq and Palestine, and eventually we're going to see Britain, with their control of Palestine, help facilitate the creation of Israel after World War II. French is going to rule Syria and Lebanon. We're going to see the modern nation state of Turkey come out of this. And we are going to see a modern Middle East be kind of just created. Now, very similar to Africa, we're going to see just these artificial states, just drawn by Europe, and a huge interference of Europe in the Middle East. And that's going to lead to a lot of the modern instability of the Middle East that we are going to get into a little bit later towards the end of this class. And we'll talk more about how the when Europe kind of abandons the Middle East and lets it have its own independence, the destabilization and the effects of that in our modern history. Now, a really big important point about the end of World War One is Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, a Democrat, Princeton professor, I believe, and an idealist, and he had his 14-point plans. Now, we talked about this in class. Tons of important provisions: abolishment of secret treaties, freedom of the seas, capitalism. But the thing that's really important about Woodrow Wilson is his League of Nations. This idea of having this peacekeeping, collection of countries to maintain the peace. And as I lectured in class a little bit, it's going to be one of the the League of Nations really symbolizes the failure of this World War One peace treaty, because it's going to fail. And we are going to see it fail with the fascists, with Japan, and with the Nazis. And they're just going to laugh at it. And they're going to walk all over the League of Nations. And the big irony is that Woodrow Wilson's going to push for this. He's going to push for this. He's going to push for this. But the United States doesn't join. And because he can't get it ratified through the Senate. because the Congress has to ratify all peace treaties. Henry Cabot Lodge is not going to let that happen. So Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations, his darling, his baby in this peace plan, it's going to fail. And it really represents just the overall failure of the Treaty of Versailles. So the main leaders, we talked a little bit about this in class. David Lloyd George of Great Britain, Clemenceau of France, Orlando of Italy, and Wilson of the United States. David Lloyd George, his goal, money. He wanted to make sure the economy was going to get right back into gear and that Great Britain can kind of get back into its mercantile ways, prevent war from happening. Just Great Britain wanted to get back into its gigantic trading empire. Clemenceau, jerk, wanted to really punish the Germans and blame the Germans for what was going on. And it's partly with Clemenceau, but a lot of this is French public opinion. The French public opinion, they really wanted to just step on the Germans and make them feel bad for what's gone on in the world and what's gone on in the war. And you get a sense from the French that and this is kind of how we're going to see that this is revenge for the Franco-Prussian War, for all the killing that's gone in World War One. But we're going to see this animosity, again, eventually bleed over into the Germans. The Germans are going to feel a lot of animosity from this, and it's going to help facilitate World War II. Orlando, remember, initially the Italians were allied with Germany, that Triple Alliance. Orlando was promised land by the Allies, Austrian land. He's not necessarily going to get it. But he's going to be a part of these negotiations, and Woodrow Wilson. Now, a lot of obstacles to our peace treaty, a lot of different conflicting opinions, a lot of different objectives for different countries. We're going to see, it's a big mess. These countries are going to have to redraw the maps of Europe. It's not going to be pretty. They're going to bring back new countries. And again, we're gonna see them really step on Germany. That's the epicenter of the problem of this peace treaty, is how terribly they treat the Germans. And this is gonna be the fuel and the ammunition that helps the Nazis and Adolf Hitler come to power, is how terrible they are. And they're also going to ruin the economy. And we're gonna get into that with the peace treaty. So this was just not a practical and not a treaty of reconciliation. This is going to be a peace conference and a treaty of revenge. We're going to see nations compete for claims of land. We're going to see the Germans. I'll show it in a map. Germany's going to be split up, and part of German land is going to be given to Poland. The new country of Czechoslovakia, and we're going to see Hitler want that back. He's going to want that back. Alsace and Lorraine, we've talked about that land. It's going to go back to the French. Hitler's going to want that back. I think one key common core that's going to unite all these nations is their fear of Bolshevism and their fear of the communists. And that will be a uniting factor. And it's one of the reasons why Russia will not be invited to the peace treaty. Okay, so we have Orlando, David Lloyd George, Clemenceau, and there is Wilson. Okay, so 5 treaties. All right, Germany and the Soviet Union not allowed to attend. That's a huge mistake. A huge mistake. You're not inviting 2 major powers to the table to negotiate. It's not really a negotiation. It's a faulty negotiation right there. And we're going to see Germany, presented with this treaty and be forced to sign it. And once the Weimar Republic signs this treaty, it is over for them. We are going to see the Nazis and groups competing for power really hold that against them, and with that they're just never going to have a lot of faith of the German people. The German people just will not trust them and will not like them. But the treaty that we got to know when it comes to the Paris Peace Conference is the Treaty of Versailles, and I want you all to be familiar with really important treaties from this class. We've had our Treaty of Westphalia, Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, our first Treaty of Paris to end the 7 Years' War, Treaty of Utrecht. You should be familiar, ladies and gentlemen, with some really important treaties in this class. This is one of our last ones, Treaty of Versailles, super important. Okay, let's talk about it. Germany, Treaty of Versailles, the peace settlement. Germany has to give Alsace and Lorraine back to France. We've seen it, from the 30 Years' War, Franco-Prussian War. It's just gone back and forth between them. Germany's Rhineland is demilitarized. Their border with France is demilitarized. Their western border demilitarized. They're not allowed to have their military over there. One of the big fronts of aggression against the League of Nations in the 1930s will be Hitler will remilitarize that Rhineland, and France is gonna, and Great Britain and the League of Nations will be like, no, you can't do that, and Hitler's simply gonna look at them and say, what are you gonna do about it? And remember, that's gonna be the big part of the League of Nations: all bark, no bite. Britain and France and the United States are going to kind of, coalesce around one another. Eventually, we're going to see the United States retreat into isolationism again, especially with the Great Depression. But they're going to pledge to help each other if Germany gets aggressive again. Germany's not allowed to have a huge military. In the East, we're going to see the Austrian-Hungarian Empire get completely dismantled. We're going to see a republic in Austria. We're going to see Hungary have their own kingdom. We're going to see a couple new countries: Yugoslavia, Poland, and you're going to see that in the map. Czechoslovakia, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Lithuania become independent states. And so we're going to see a lot of new countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this should remind you of 1815, the Congress of Vienna, when they redraw the map. New countries, right? Like our super Netherlands, like Piedmont and Sardinia. You should be familiar with how the map has changed. We have a new map. And some of these changes will facilitate World War II. Okay. Again, some of the most notorious parts of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany is going to be required to pay for the full cost of the war. It's around $2 trillion with these war reparations. I guess it was going to be about $5 billion a year, which back then was a lot of money. Today, it's even, with inflation, adjusted inflation, it's a lot more. But Germany's not going to be able to pay all this money. And I foreshadowed this in class when we were talking that this is going to be a huge contribution to the instability of the world economy. We are going to see some of the Western powers, like the United States, like France, like Britain, be reliant upon Germany. Their economies will be reliant upon Germany being able to pay back these loans. Germany will not be able to pay back these loans. And with that loss of money, some of the Western economies will start to, go into a recession and depression. And we're going to see that really help facilitate our Great Depression. Is just the complete, annihilation of the German economy. The war guilt clause. Germany has to accept full responsibility for World War I. That's not very nice, and we know that is not what happened. It was between Austria and Serbia, but Germany is going to have to take responsibility for that. You betcha Adolf Hitler is going to run that provision around the people and rile them up and get them frustrated and get them angry. Big problem. And the Germans were forced to sign this treaty without negotiations. The Weimar Republic will never, ever be able to overcome accepting this peace treaty. They're not going to be able to overcome that. And they are going to lose the faith of the people because of this. Huge. Okay. Germany's going to lose all of its colonies. We're going to see that in the Pacific. A lot of that territory is going to go to Japan. We're going to see them lose their African colonies. Not really a big deal for Germany. It's not like Kaiser Wilhelm II was doing that to be one of those big boys, to be acknowledged on the world stage, but not too big of a deal. We're going to see the League of Nations establish, mandates. Essentially, we're going to see, France and Britain control huge swaths of influence over Asia, over Africa, over the Middle East. It's mainly Japan in Asia, but we'll see France and Britain with this mandate system in Africa and the Middle East controlling it. Example, like Syria, Iraq, Palestine. We saw Great Britain and France really taking a lot of control over that. And it's important to acknowledge that the colonies, participated heavily in the war. A lot of colonial leaders supported Allied war efforts and Central Power war efforts. We saw some German colonies participate as well, and they thought that their people would be rewarded with greater independence and economic ties to Europe after the war. Not necessarily the case. And this is going to foreshadow some of that decolonization that we see after World War II, and we will see that really them being ignored after World War One is gonna after the Second World War, and when they participate in the Second World War, this time they're gonna say like, hey, we want our own countries, and we'll see that with decolonization in the late 1940s, 50s. Let's evaluate the peace treaty, ladies and gentlemen. It was widely criticized by everybody. It really it was not effective. Now you might be saying, wait, if the Allies criticized it, why did they sign into why did they sign it? Why did they make it? Well, the problem was no one was necessarily going to be happy. No party was truly going to be happy. So they had to come to some sort of agreement. And the big problem that when I look at it, it was the fact that they didn't invite Germany, didn't invite the Soviet Union. It wasn't a true peace treaty. It was kind of just really Britain, France, United States, and kind of Italy getting together and just throwing something out there. And so it was just very poor. It was just a poor process and poor treaty. One of the big problems with the peace treaty was those war reparations. And John Maynard Keynes, he foreshadowed, he's an economist that we talked about a little bit earlier, who believed in deficit spending. He believed that this peace treaty was going to bring economic ruin to Europe, and he was foreshadowing the Great Depression. And he was saying, hey, those war reparations are really going to hurt the world economy if you don't help Germany, and if you're reliant on Germany with those reparations and they can't pay for it, and they're going to have to default on those loans, and banks are going to close. And I mean, he knew, he saw the clouds gathering, the financial storms gathering over this process in Europe, and he knew it was going to come. By eliminating the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it created a whole bunch of new problems. Well, creating new countries like Czechoslovakia, Poland, Yugoslavia. Now you're going to see some of these ethnic groups who had been part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. They're going to still be ignored, and they're going to want their own country. So you're going to still see nationalism be a big problem. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire being torn apart was a huge economic problem because, well, for example, you might have steel factories in Austria, but all the steel is in Hungary, and how are those factories in Austria, and how are they going to get all that steel now in a separate country of Hungary? So it really tore the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, that state. It really tore that state apart economically, and so they really had to almost start over, and that was a big problem. And like I said, you're going to see a lot of minorities outside the borders of their national homelands. You're going to see a lot of Germans in Poland. You're going to see a lot of Germans in Czechoslovakia. And so we see nationalism really cause a lot of problems. I mean, it was a huge force that facilitated World War I. And that was a big problem with the Allies, is that they just were like, okay, Poland's here, Czechoslovakia is here, Yugoslavia is here. I mean, they're just doing this, and they didn't understand the original cause of World War I, that nationalism. And again, this is going to be a key cause for World War II, because Hitler's going to be like, hey, there's Germans in Poland, we're going to go free them, and boom, justification for invading Poland. He's going to want the Sudetenland, where there's a lot of Germans, millions of Germans, and Czechoslovakia, and he's just going to take it. I mean, it's going to be a justification for why Hitler invades these countries. So there's going to be a lot of unhappy ethnic groups in some of these countries. That's a familiar story for us in World War I. By excluding Germany and Russia, that settlement really ignored the reality. That really ignored, especially with nationalism, they were just ignoring reality. You have to include Germany in that discussion. You have to include Russia in that settlement. Those are two important powers. And like I said, the United States is not even going to join the League of Nations. So this process was a mess, and you're going to see the results of that mess. Well, Great Depression, fascism, World War II. We're going to see it. The mess of this peace treaty really manifests itself in the next 20 years, and it's coming, and it's going to be wild. It's going to be out of control. Okay. Yeah, France was left to defend a lot of these new arrangements, and it simply is not going to be strong enough, especially without the United States and the League of Nations. Germany is going to be salty at this, and Hitler's going to use that salty attitude to gain power and run it back. So this peace treaty was just a mess, ladies and gentlemen, all around. Effects of the World War One, ladies and gentlemen, destroyed Europe, and Europe will rebuild, but I mean, it was just awful. It was awful. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the 1920s and 1930s. And it's going to be that this generation is going to be considered the lost generation. We're going to see a lot of just a really pessimistic, broken outlook on life. You know, there's a famous poem written in America. I can't think of the author right now, called "The Wasteland." And you're just going to see people coming back from the war and just this lost generation of just depression, just people, just a lot of lives have been broken. And it's really, we're going to see a really pessimistic, next couple decades. Really important new development with World War One is going to be America intervening in European affairs, and we're going to see that more and more and more and more and more. I mean, after World War II, we're going to see NATO with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, with Western Europe allying with America. Whoa, huge development, huge change. So America getting involved in European affairs, and it's going to get even more intense in World War II and post World War II. We have a Soviet country, and we have a communist country. That's a huge development. Huge development. The disappointment that I alluded to, that lost generation, we're going to see eventually economic problems because of those war reparations. And we're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, a huge effect of World War One is fascism. Huge effect. And we will talk, I'm going to give you a great definition and break all that down in the next chapter. Fascism is important. We're going to see cynicism, people being very cynical, like I talked about, very depressed, very, very angry, this lost generation. We're going to see renewed racism, the Aryan race. Classism, that would be a huge part of the Soviet Union, the proletariats, dictatorships, Franco, Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler. We are going to see a changed Europe, big time. All right. And the greatest effect of World War One will be World War II. It is directly correlated. Okay. Last but not least, we have the end of the German Empire, Russian, Austrian, and Ottoman empires. The end of the Habsburgs. Charles V, Maria Theresa, gone. Peter the Great's family, gone. All those Frederick Williams, gone. Europe has changed. All right, and this is it this just shows the new Turkey, the new Middle East. All right, Turkey. All right, and we have our new map of Europe. And I think I put some of those on Google Classrooms. All right, and I showed you that new map. I mean, just look at that. We have a new map here. Germany's Rhineland right there. Alsace and Lorraine going back to France. This has all been given to Poland. All right, so Germany has been separated from East Prussia, Germany. New countries right here. Tons of new countries. All right, new country, Czechoslovakia. Okay, look at Austria separated from Hungary, Yugoslavia. We have a new Europe. Look at that. All right, Turkey, Syria, Palestine. Okay, the Middle East has been broken up. Big changes, ladies and gentlemen, and you should be familiar with that. We will stop right here. We are done.